Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring. And I am here today with Ruben Gomez, who is the creator of the seasonal movement. And we're going to get into what that is and how you can live your life according to this movement in a little bit. But before we do, welcome, Ruben. How are you?
Thank you, Tracy. I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing great. So, have you been folkloring lately? And if so, how?
Yeah, I can't wait, actually. I tend to go in a solo camping trip. I fast. I get away from cell phones, any sort of electronics. I bring my tent and a notepad, and that's it. And I tend to do that in the spring and in the fall.
Mhm.
And I have been watching the weather. I would have been doing it by now, but the weather is still a little wintry. I
Okay.
say within the next week and a half, 2 weeks, I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be camping by myself, connecting to nature, observing what's going on, cleaning myself spiritually and physically. And it's like part of my highlights throughout the year.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I would love to do that. As for me, I have a couple of cooking related things. Today, I baked bread this morning, and so the house smells amazing right now. And last week, I thought I would try my hand at making sauerkraut, which was surprisingly simple to do. It's only a few ingredients. And so that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot.
Well, I wish I was a little closer so I can get a little taste of it, but I bet it's good.
It was St. Patrick's Day not too long ago, so I was, in the mood. Okay, so can you tell my listeners about yourself and sort of your journey that got you to where you are today, and then we'll talk about the movement that you've created?
Absolutely. And I think my story is, in a way, direct to folklore and ancestry because I'm originally from Venezuela. I grew up in Venezuela and I moved to the Midwest to Omaha, Nebraska when I was 20 years old. That was over, I say, almost 15 years ago, not yet. And my ancestry, when I look back, most of my family comes from Spain and Italy. They moved to Venezuela. And when I moved to the Midwest, I had no idea what living in a four-season location was like.
Hmm.
I will travel around the world, but usually we don't go to the Midwest in the middle of the winter. That is not a touristy spot. And the first few years, it was great. I'm pursuing a new life, I'm going places, and I was motivated. But then about 5 years into it, I started to feel this anxiety. And looking back, it was basically February, middle of February in the Midwest. It was gray. I can still see it like it's a picture in my head. It's like it's great outside. It's windy. You hear the wind. It's cloudy. It's wet. You don't want to be out there. And this movie kept repeating itself. I would work from home. I would wake up early, but then I won't get out of bed till maybe 9:30. Work for a few hours, and all of a sudden I'm done. Like I have such an anxiety and such a confusion while working in my computer that I just like shut it down. I'm done for the day, and it's just maybe 2, 3 o'clock,
Hmm.
and my wife will come from work. We will eat. We will go to bed, and then I couldn't sleep.
Hmm.
And that would just kept repeating itself. And 2 weeks into it, I tell my wife, this is what's happening. I have no idea. I have never felt this way. I explain her and she looks at me and she's, honey, you just have the winter blues.
Right.
I'm like, what is the winter blues? So going back to folklore and ancestry, no one in my lineage, in my genetical imprint has experienced this before.
Hmm.
Living in a four-season environment really was having an impact in myself.
Sure.
And that's where my journey started. Essentially, that's what motivated me to create the seasonal movement, to look into how the environment affect our thinking or feeling or behaving, how we have swing moods throughout the year,
Mhm.
energy peaks and lows. And I basically got obsessed with it because it's extremely interesting, and I found that that is the key to live in harmony all year round. So that is what I bring to the table, a perspective into, hey, our genes matter, who we are, but also the environment. Let's link them together. Let's create some harmony. And let's go back to where we come from, which is, deep connection to nature,
Right.
deep connection to our environment. There is a dependency there that now is kind of forgotten.
Hmm.
And I bring that back to the table and say, this is important. This is a way to live in harmony, to experience a good well being, to age gracefully. Let's follow the rhythm of the seasons and let's use that to create routines that are seasonally optimized
Hmm.
to have our best life right now.
That's really interesting because I grew up in the Midwest. So for me, that was just a normal part of life. It was like things were quieter and you rested more in the winter. And then as I got to be an adult, of course, you are expected to produce at the, same level year round. We're brought up to, even if we're office workers, we're still little like, factory machines.
Yeah.
And so it's funny when, people do get depressed and stuff like that. It's like they're not following those rhythms of sort of, nestling in and spending time cuddled up or, what have you. Because we're just like, you got to get up, you got to go to work. Doesn't matter if it snowed last night. You don't have
Yeah.
time you got to be at the office. And I think somewhat things have changed since lockdown, where people are like, no, you can work from home and be effective. And there was a certain point in which I just got one of those, sad lamps, that
Yeah.
the seasonal affective disorder lamps. And it's, like it just didn't occur to me, like, maybe I'm supposed to be living differently and
Yeah.
not just like I'm going to buy this lamp so I can power through, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the first thing that comes through is that, wow, something is out of alignment.
Hmm.
And since we live in such a productivity environment, the first thing that comes to mind is like something's wrong with me. I have to biohack myself into, improving my production, which that is part of the equation. Absolutely.
Right.
Like I'm not against just chill during the winter and let things happen. No, there are things that we can do. What I'm proposing is that let's understand this to a higher degree.
Hmm.
Let's understand who we are, and let's find a way to go with the energy of the season.
Hmm.
Every season has an energy, and perhaps in the winter we're spending a lot more time indoors. Wouldn't you think that affects our neurochemicals and hormones and or that how we move throughout the year changes?
Hmm.
So the reason that the seasons became perhaps my focus is because the environment, we all come to an agreement that the environment has scientifically been proved that is like a dramatic influence on who we are, who
Hmm.
we turn out to be. It's our environment. Well, the environment happens to change 4 times a year. Like, it's like kind of like the patterns of the year are the seasons.
Right.
So understanding those patterns into detail allow us to enter into that energy,
Hmm.
honor that energy, but
Hmm.
also understand that, yeah, productivity is on the table nowadays. We want to increase our energy a little bit in the winter, and that's fair game. Absolutely. I do it all the time. The lamp, there's another one, can be grounding mats as well.
Hmm.
And that's because in the winter we don't tend to go outside and be barefoot as much. So just understanding what are those key missing ingredients in our routine,
Hmm.
so that we can decide, okay, I'm gonna plug this into my routine. But
Right.
also understand the energy of the winter is one of introspection. When it comes down to folklore, I'm a big proponent of novelty throughout the year,
Hmm.
so that we can age gracefully. And it's one of the main behaviors that I touch on from a seasonal perspective, and is that the winter is a great time to perhaps go into reading, writing, quilting, cooking, essentially spend time indoors like we used to do 100, 200 years ago. And also understanding that the biggest difference today compared to 100, 150 years ago is the lighting environment has changed dramatically.
Right.
So from a seasonal perspective, we tend to think about temperature.
Hmm.
It's going to get cold. That's what I was told when I moved to the Midwest. Oh, it's so cold. But nobody told me the light changes dramatically.
Right.
It's like 5 p.m. it's dark. It's 9 p.m. in the summer. It's light out.
Mm-hmm.
I go into detail and I look at my specific geographic area and I realize, wow, the winter time, the day of the winter compared to the summer is 1.5 times longer in daylight than
Mm-hmm.
the winter. It's basically a day and a half
Right.
compared to the winter time. And what I want us to understand is the lighting changes dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So that the lighting is what affects our circadian rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look back into, how were we living 150 years ago, when it became dark, we perhaps have a little lighting. It must be a candle.
Right.
Then it turned out to be a kerosene light. Now, what I want us to notice is that in our house, there's just LED lights everywhere.
Right.
That's the first remodeling project that is tackled. Is, we need some LED lighting in the living room, which until the 60s, there was no lighting in the living rooms, like overhead lighting.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a switch with an outlet. Like 50s and 60s, when you go in those houses, you don't find overhead lighting in the living room. So my point is, looking back 150 years ago, our lighting environment has changed dramatically. And it hasn't been until the last perhaps 20 years
Mm-hmm.
that this trend just took off. So there is an epidemic happening in front of us, which is blue light epidemic.
Right.
There's an epidemic happening right in front of us, which is, again, talking about being disconnected with nature and with the environment. That is actually that is something that is for the first time in humanity we're experiencing. And again, the approach is where we were healthier 150 years ago than what we are now.
Mm-hmm.
The cancer and disease wasn't that big of a problem 150 years ago. Surely you get injured, you die. But when it comes down to chronic disease, now we are experiencing that at a higher level. And a lot of that has to do with many things, but the lighting, I want us to pay attention to that.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like, all of the processed food that we're eating now, that people just didn't eat that way, and they ate seasonally. You were eating root vegetables over the winter and not fruit because that's what kept. So, when you think about folkloring specifically and sort of going back to the thought about how you live your life based on the land around you. I mean, you have a unique perspective because you didn't grow up in the environment that you now live in, so you could see the differences. Like, I was struggling the other day. I bought a bag of potatoes, and every time I buy potatoes, it's like it feels like instantaneously they start to, get eyes on them and it's like, what am I doing wrong? And it was like, okay,
The light.
yeah, the light, right. You have to store them in the dark. And people had root cellars back then because they knew that that was what you needed to do in order to, make that last because you need to eat through the winter. And so I think that that's really fascinating of how we lose some of our skills based on the fact that, we don't need them anymore, right?
Absolutely. For example, wintertime will arrive. Most people will have a fire going on.
Hmm.
And there's a primal part of our brain that can actually get peace by doing the same thing,
Hmm.
by having a chimney if we do and using it, actually using it. And again, it's not for everybody, but it's just looking back into how were we living 150 years ago, how are we living now. Take the best of both worlds. I'm not against technology. I'm not against where we're heading. I'm thankful for all the improvements, but we have to also understand that we live in an experiment.
Yeah.
And a big example can be, doctors medicating cigarettes, in the 50s and that being kind of, not knowing the health consequences.
Hmm.
The same is happening with the light environment. The reason I bring the light and not the food is because I think by now we all agree that most people know the food industry
Hmm.
is creating a lot of issues, but the lighting is something that is not on the media as much as yet. Even though there is scientific research, it has been proved that immediate immediate negative consequences happen from an abundance of blue light at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the long term, chronic disease comes from it as well. So we already have scientific evidence. So that's why I bring it up. And when it comes down to the winter time, perhaps
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, hey, you don't have to have your lights blown up throughout your whole house. Go back. So it is funny because I got 3 kids under 6, and I do know the risk consequences, and primarily I do want them to go to sleep early.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think people 150 years ago in the winter were sleeping by, perhaps 11 or 10. I think that by 10 o'clock, they were probably ready to go to sleep. And it's because melatonin production follows a natural pattern throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as it gets dark, or melatonin production increases, and within 3 hours, an average adult should be feeling sleepy. There is a little room that there is some night owls, but again, if your lighting environment it wasn't as oriented to productivity, to work on a computer, to be on a TV, to be on your phone, or melatonin tends to rise a lot more natural, and we tend to sleep a lot earlier in the winter compared than the summer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I pay attention to those things, and I keep my lights very dim at night during the any time of the year, but especially during the winter time. And all you have to see the kids' reactions, because the kids are not really into what time it is.
Yeah.
The kids don't know what time it is, right? Like, that is like our natural rhythm as a human. So we gotta be more like kids, and we gotta be more like when I keep my environments dark at night and we eat with a candle, which we do every once in a while, and it's fun for them. They feel like they're camping. And, again, they're young children. Then they go to sleep a lot easier, a lot faster. And again, it's just honoring who we are, or internal rhythms. From a folkloric perspective, I think that it can be implemented more by people that love the culture if they are more aware. So I'm just trying to bring awareness of things that will be good for you.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that I figured out that lighting could be problematic. I have a lot of chemical sensitivities. And when I was more reactive, I used to be much more reactive than I am now. And when I would go to the grocery store, I'd be okay like around the edges. But as soon as I got into like the refrigerated or frozen aisle, when there was fluorescent lighting not only coming from above, but from all sides, I would start to have a reaction. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the lighting. And at first I was like, am I crazy? Am I imagining this? But then on like different forums for people who have the same sensitivities that I do, they're like, oh yeah, no, I can't go down that aisle. It's. And so it was fascinating to me that just like that intense amount of light hitting me from all sides was enough to throw me into a reaction. Whereas I didn't go over my threshold when I was they say you're supposed to eat around the edges of the grocery store because that's where all the
Yeah.
food is. Yeah, and I wasn't reacting when I was in those areas. So that's fascinating. And, as far as the like lighting in general goes, I think that it's one of the reasons that we used to see stories about, the dangers that lurk in the night, right?
Yeah.
And, it was like you need to be inside. You need to be, settled down. You shouldn't be out and about. And that's, I think, one of the reasons we saw those. And when, we started moving into cities and things were less wild and more controlled, that's been dropping away. And now they're like, oh, New York City, the city that never sleeps. And it's like people they just expect like they can do everything at any hour of the day because there's light for them to do it. And so then you start to see stories of things hidden in the shadows, right? When you get urban legends of
Uh,
that kind of thing. And so, it shifts over time. And I also think it's fascinating. Like, we used to only hear stories of aliens, right? Like, somebody's out on a country road in the middle of nowhere, their car dies, alien comes down, right? Those were alien stories,
uh-huh.
which to me was sort of a continuation of like fairy stories, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
like now you starting like I've started to hear different stories about people. There was a woman on a plane a couple of years back who was saying that there was a guy on the plane that was an alien, And there was a woman on a train who said everybody on the train were aliens, and they're like freaking out. So those stories, I think, is in part due to a shift in our relationship with light.
Yeah, so the relationship that we have with lighting is the relationship within our hormones. I
Hmm.
already mentioned melatonin as it gets dark,
Right?
but what you felt when you enter into those bright places, which the lighting on the refrigeration area is brighter than anywhere else. And by brighter, what I truly mean is there is a lot more blue light into it.
Hmm.
The
Oh.
density of the blue light there is a lot more intense, and the blue light is the enemy. It's not just light, it's
Hmm.
blue light.
Hmm.
Blue light is the highest in nature around noontime when the sun is on the meridian. That is the most intense blue light, and that's what they say, don't go outside around, around noontime, which it shifts with the seasons.
Hmm.
And it's because you get sunburn.
Right.
But in the sunset and the sunrise, the red is actually the light is actually red. There is more red wave lighting on it. Now, what we experience in our relationship with lighting is one of cortisol, stress, and melatonin, rest. So when you enter into those very bright environments, since you are so sensitive, what you're actually experiencing is cortisol rising at a dramatic pace
Okay.
because you're very sensitive. So cortisol is not bad, but when it's chronic cortisol, that's when it becomes the issue. So when you're talking about the city that never sleeps, well, that means that there is people that are out and about all night long. That is an inverse relationship with cortisol. And again, from data, from research with shift workers, we know that it's a very dangerous place to be from a long-term disease perspective.
Hmm.
So our relationship with lighting is one of cortisol and melatonin. So back in the day, people staying nearby the fire and staying nearby is because, they are naturally less alert. Like, why don't you go where maybe, the animals are? Is because you're tired, you're not as alert. The
Right.
natural relationship between cortisol and humans is good. Like, is what keep us alert, is what kept us on our game, it kept us on our toes, which generally is the highest around the meridian. That's most likely when, hunters will go out perhaps.
Okay.
But as we evolve and the lighting now becomes abundant at night, it's basically getting us completely out of shift with our circadian rhythm, with our natural rhythms, and it's creating a multitude of disease that we're experiencing now. So that is kind of like the next thing to be looking after within the next 10-15 years. Is going to be the research is going to pop up and be like, okay, everybody pay attention to this,
Hmm.
dim your lights. And it's already out there, but it's not everywhere. And that's why I'm making it my point to also, hey, when we're talking about the seasons, is understanding how the light environment changes and using it in our advantage.
Yeah, I think that people are starting to understand that, especially with screens. Like, I've got an app on my phone that turns off the blue light at 9 p.m. And I don't even think about it. And the same with my laptop, right? And so like they're starting to understand, but this is
Mm-hmm.
a much bigger issue than just the screen time, right?
Correct. Yeah, blue light comes from anything that is artificial nowadays. Like, think about it. When did we start having screens in our phones? Like, when did your phone became a screen? That was probably less than 20 years ago.
Right.
Because okay, we had cell phones, but they probably had all the buttons on it. Green light was coming out of it. No big deal. The same with the TVs. Like, when big plasma TVs became the norm, again, if you look back, that was probably 20 years ago.
Right.
And then the same with LED lighting. When the light bulb kind of went out of fashion and now you can't find it anymore.
Right.
And I have historical data on that, but I'm just using the number 20 years ago just to kind of create a common theme here. So again, that is something relatively new
Right.
that we are living. I call it an experiment. And it is the same that we were living when opioids were being prescribed left and right.
Right.
And essentially now we see the consequences, and we have to be more careful with the power of technology. Like, that's what it was, right? Technology got to that point. We just have to be a little more careful. We didn't know. Now we know. So we're seeing that transition, and the earlier that we transition into it, the better we will be.
Yeah, I mean, people are not cautious with technology. And, I see a lot of people using AI. And first of all, it's terrible because they're stealing from artists to like train the AI. But secondly, it's terrible for the environment. ChatGPT uses 10 times the amount of power that Google does. So that's terrible. And then you're also, you need precious metals for the electronics, right? And so, it's just in so many ways that technology is bad for the planet, and we're just not paying attention.
Well, even if we do, it's just so complex. And I'm going to give you an example. Again, 200 years ago, you wanted to go somewhere, you most likely walk. If you were lucky enough, you got on a horse.
Hmm.
And then as time progressed, you got on a steamship, then you got on a train. I just want to kind of see the evolution of technology
Hmm.
and how even the things that we don't think about can be so damaging. So there is a frequency in our earth. There's an electromagnetic frequency that it is the electromagnetic frequency of earth. And when we are barefoot on it, we connect to it, we balance, we harmonize.
Right.
Now, again, going back 100 years ago or 150 years ago, most people will get on a horse. The horse itself has a frequency. I
Right.
mean, you see how they are used as therapy.
Hmm.
Like horses have a therapeutic frequency. It's just the way you can put it, right? Like their being, like they use that today as therapy.
Hmm.
And okay, just to put a very black and white contrast.
Hmm.
Now, technology is here today. I'm just going to briefly touch on the fact that we have microwaves, air fryers, we have cell phones, Wi-Fi. All of these have an electromagnetic frequency. But going back to the way we transport today, oh, great, electric cars. They are going to save on pollution, right? Like, again, there's so many angles that it's nobody's fault. I truly believe that. I don't think we do it on purpose, but it's just to show we're living in an experiment.
Hmm.
Every piece of technology gets put out is an experiment. So going back to the horse having a very positive electromagnetic frequency charge,
Hmm.
now we're getting into perhaps the Cybertruck or like the new electrical car that is out there. That car has an electromagnetic frequency. That is something that just happened the last 10 years, right?
Right.
So again, we're living in an experiment. And going back to folklore, like you can see that it was good for humans to, be with a horse. Like that was a transportation method. Then was it good for them to be on a car? Well, and it has more pollution again, like the cities, and it wasn't as great. But when you compare to perhaps you are sitting on a gigantic battery
Hmm.
that perhaps is great. I don't think so, but I'm just gonna give it the
Hmm.
benefit of the doubt because all I want to say is that this is an experiment. We have to pay attention on the way we feel.
Hmm.
If we pay attention to the way we feel and we don't take for granted, then we can start making, okay, I'm not feeling great. What is the pattern here? And that's the process I went through as I started looking in my environment and realizing, wow, when the seasons shift, I go through these ups and downs like nothing else has changed. And again, it's so much that comes from different angles that sometimes it's hard to realize. But the biggest thing is just to become aware that we are living in an experiment. I'm not saying that there's a plan out there or anything like that. Everybody's just putting technology and we get to choose if we want to use it or not. We just have to be wise and understand that even people with good intentions, which, again, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, they come up with products that then we got to pay attention how they affect us.
Right.
And the same thing happens with the seasons. Since I wasn't from here, I'm like, I have never feel this way. I'm never used to slowing down throughout the year. Like I'm always going, going, going. But then I started to burn out and I started to crash.
Right.
And again, the energy just kind of calling me in that direction and me going in a different direction. And that happened in the fall, in the spring, in the summer, and in the winter. It was an up and down. It's not just the winter blues. That is when it became very obvious to me, though.
Hmm. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how people can bring these ideas and this connecting with nature to themselves in the different seasons. How can they bring that into their life?
From a very practical perspective, I know that Native Americans were connected to nature at perhaps the highest level that has ever been. Sadly, that information is harder to find, perhaps,
Right.
than Chinese traditional medicine. So, Chinese traditional medicine, anyone can Google it, and you can start learning about it. Essentially, it's not just about the seasons and the energy of the seasons, it is about everything.
Mhm.
But how can we use what we know from Chinese traditional medicine to connect more with nature? So, just to give a rundown, the winter brings us inwards. Like we reflect more. We're spending time indoors. It's darker. And we can use that in a very powerful manner. For example, we keep doing work, like we don't stop. But when we get a little bit of time, we start wondering, am I going in the right direction? Like that happens naturally.
Right.
That's just a natural part of being human beings. So what we want to be is aware of that and create wellness routines throughout the winter that will support that.
Mhm.
Why? Because some people tend to go in a depression mode when they realize I'm not in the right place. Like this is not what I wanted for my life, and look at me now. So again, if he goes into praying, if he goes into visualizing, if he goes into gratitude journaling, that uses that energy of going inwards and it projects it in a positive manner
Mhm.
so that then you can just start thinking positively throughout that season. And then it allows you to plan, it allows you to prepare. And when the spring hits, you're ready. I mean, you're already moving in that direction, like you are in synergy with
Mhm.
the energy of the season.
Mhm.
That's what we want to do. We want to be one with the energy. We want to be flowing through it. We want to avoid the drastic ups and downs because if the spring arrives and you haven't honored that winter, frustration tends to happen. Why? Because the energy of the spring is one of movement, is one of go, is one of rebirth. There
Right.
is a revival happening all around us. All the energy that was on the ground, on the roots throughout the whole winter, start exploding in front of our eyes,
Right.
and we are 70% water. We feel that and we want to move with it. But if you don't know where to go, that can be very negative. So, again, if you have honored the winter and you are already moving in that direction because you took the time to realize where you wanted to go and you have a firm aim, once the spring hits, you just increase your speed and you just keep going in the right direction. That's going to continue to expand into the summer. Now the days are getting longer, so the issue that I used to experience was that I will get very low in the winter, and
Mhm.
the fall time I will get confused, anxious, perhaps close to depression. And then during the spring and the summer, I will get those bursts of energy, and I will get like too spontaneous. It's called hypomania, is what it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
Is getting too out of whack and going in different directions, basically not having an aim,
Right.
not knowing where to go. So I would be busy, 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 going from project to project. And sure, from the outside, I'm doing a lot of work, but am I really going the direction that I wanted to go?
Mhm.
So what we want to be aware as is that when the summer hits, we have the tendency in this society to go very hard for too long. And what we want to avoid is burning out, which has become this phenomena is happening all the time, that it changes you physically and psychologically. It
Right.
leaves an imprint when you go too long, too hard. So what we want to do is understand that that is the tendency of the season
Right.
and bring wellness routines to it, the same way we did it in the winter, we do in the spring, we do in the summer. And when we're talking about spring and summer, we want to calm ourselves down.
Okay.
We want to relax our nervous system because there is so much influencing happening around us. Nature is bursting. People are super social. There is a lot of events happening. The sun is a lot more intense.
Mhm.
All those tend to inflame our nervous system.
Mhm.
So how about taking a little breathe meditation every single day? How about taking perhaps the morning a little calm in a calm manner?
Mhm.
I have routines that I help implement to understand that during that season, that will help you. more compared than in the winter. So it's finding what works well
Mm-hmm.
to balance that energy. And again, it's not like the summer we're going to go down as low as the winter, or the winter we're going to go as high as the summer. It's none of that. It's just going a little bit. The way that I put it is the yin yang. If you look at the yin yang, that is the energy of the seasons.
Okay.
The year starts in January, and it's low. It's like the dark, if the black is on top, is the biggest. And then as we transition into the spring and then into the summer, we hit the highest energy, the yang energy, and then we go back down. So our goal is to follow that smooth, harmonious wave,
Mm-hmm.
instead of looking like the stock market going up and down, up and down, up and down, and then just be, erratic and unpredictable. That is like the two contrasts. It's like you want to go with the flow, you want to follow the river, and you want to be in alignment with the yin yang, perhaps, instead of just being all over the place like
Sure.
the stock market.
Sure. And I think that we used to have more stories that would help us understand that transition from, the yin to the yang is part of the natural flow of things. We had rebirth stories in the spring. We've got Easter, we've got the origins of what is now Groundhog Day. And so it's like we had these stories that would help us make sense of the seasons. And I think that it's interesting that you frame it as like a wave, because I was thinking to myself, spring and fall are really transition times. And
Yeah.
it's got to be like the rebirth side of it, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I was thinking, like, what do you do in those transitions? Because like here on the equinox, right, it was like warm one day, and then overnight, morning of the equinox, I get up, there's snow everywhere. And then
Yeah.
as the day went on, it all melted, right? And I am like,
Yeah.
that was like a description of spring for me, right? It all happened in that one day, which was great. It was a great, metaphor that I could lean into, going, that's how it goes around here. And it feels like it's hard to be very in tune with that transition,
Mhm.
because like before we'd have stories about harvest and folklore around harvest time and harvest
Yeah.
festivals and stuff, and we don't do that as much now. All of our celebrations do seem to be in the summer, or many of them, right? Because people want to
Yeah.
be outside and they want to go do fun stuff outside. You miss that. How many people are still out there wassailing in the winter? And in the UK, they are, but not.
Yeah. Yeah. On ice. Yeah. I know people.
Yeah. So I think that it was those traditions that helped us stay in line with how the seasons progressed and how we are in relationship to those seasons.
That is what I propose. I have a method and I have a mindset to it. I just explained the practicality of it.
Hmm.
But if you go into details, the first thing I want to say is that spring and fall, basically, you can look at the climate as the year as two seasons, and then the spring and the fall are transitional.
Hmm.
I feel like the spring and the fall have the four seasons into it. It's just a transition, and it's primarily just the energy and the lighting transition through it.
Right.
But this spring, I already noticed, again, I have the eye to it. It's just being intentional about those details.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, I just noticed the first bee landing on my hand. This is the first bee. How long till I saw one? There is a rebirth happening. Oh, the first fly. I already saw the first fly. Oh, the first blooming, like the first piece of grass that is turning.
Hmm.
All that has a non-conscious reaction in our brain. Our brains are primal, they're primitive, they develop over thousands and thousands of years, and they develop to allow us to survive.
Hmm.
Subconsciously, we see those signs, and the brain start producing hormones.
Hmm.
Oh, it's springtime. Let's start shredding that fat. Let's increase the metabolism.
Right.
It's all happening without us understanding it. Like, I might be conscious of it because I study, and that's what I want to bring to the equation, is that our metabolism changes.
Yeah.
Why is now so wild in the summer? Because our metabolism is at the highest, or energy levels are at the highest.
Mm-hmm.
When again, that's because we are not in line with what's happening, and we are just going like the stock market. It's such a big burst in the summer, and then it's a big crash in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, we used to have more festivities in the fall time and in the springtime. Like we will celebrate, we will be conscious that there is a shift happening.
Right.
So being aware of all those changes is the beginning. Chinese traditional medicine believes that there were 5 seasons. There weren't 4, there were 5.
Mm.
The current 4-season schedule we're into is what we just decided, not too long ago, but there's other traditions. Again, just looking at the yin yang is perhaps just 2 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
but Chinese traditional medicine believes on a late summer. That is one of the energies.
Mm.
Late summer, and late summer feels very different than early summer. Like it's actually kind of going down. The days are still very long, but it's kind of like slower.
Right.
So as a society, we non-consciously have reacted
Mm-hmm.
to this change. We're not in constant connection with nature anymore, but we are still being led by our hormones and our neurotransmitters. We are directly reacting to seasonal cues.
Right.
You look out your window, the environment changes throughout the whole year.
Yep.
That has a chemical influence in you, and then you behave in a certain way. That is what I bring to the equation, is that we have to be conscious about what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then now we can harness that to use it for our advantage,
Mm-hmm.
to bring novelty. Again, when you're talking about festivities, so usually a festivity will start something new.
Right.
It's like from now on we start the harvesting, or from now on we start the planting, or from now, like there's always the beginning of something. So when basically I have the seasons framework, which is the way that we make sure that every important behavior in your life is in alignment with the seasons.
Okay.
Which is that, what do we know from neuroscience is that a happy human being is sleeping well,
Mm-hmm.
is moving and exercising,
Right.
is having a good nutrition, is eating well, is in connection with loved ones,
Sure.
is in connection with nature, and has novelty in his life, things that get him excited, that get him to do new things, to learn new languages, instruments. So what we want to make sure is that every single season we are having those 6 ingredients
Mm-hmm.
in our weekly routine.
Mm-hmm.
And by understanding the environmental changes, we can actually make it extremely convenient. We can make it extremely fun, and we can be in alignment with our biology and with the environment. That's the whole goal.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because I've certainly heard studies about people. There was a study out of Harvard that studied this group of from school age up until they passed. These mostly men, because it was a boys' school originally. They added women later.
Back in the day,
Yeah. And they said that the two key factors in longevity was it was, don't drink too much alcohol, and it's loneliness. Loneliness is one of the things that shortens people's lives. And so that's very interesting. But I had never heard, and it makes perfect sense. I had never heard anybody use the idea that like novelty, learning new things, developing new skills, that was also a key part of it. And that it resonates with me very strongly because yeah, of course you need to, like people need to be creating, and are so many people's jobs are the same for years and years and years. Even if they move from one job to the next, they're sitting at a desk or they're in a factory, and they don't have that kind of mental stimulation. And even like when I had dogs, right? It was like they said, it's okay to let your dog out in the yard sometimes, right? But they need to go on walks for mental stimulation. They will be bored and become destructive if they don't. And so I think, that's true for most animals, which were animals. And so that's really interesting to me, of that whole creativity part of it.
So you touched on a few factors, and I gotta dive deeper into it. Which number one is the connection with others. just from a seasonal perspective, we know that there is peaks during the year that human connection is at a rise.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know that there is a drop into it. For example, will be in the fall, what I consider the fall, and create a seasonal routine for the fall. We ask ourselves, are we going to be in contact with a lot of people or not? The answer in the fall usually is yes. So then the priority is to actually give yourself a little bit of time if the person is an introverted. Why? Because in the fall we have Halloween, we have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas. I kind of put it into the equation
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the Christmas celebrations start happening weeks before.
Right.
And usually every holiday is a few of them. It's not, it's not just one event, it's a few of them. So compare that to the winter, which might be January, February, and March. There are not that many holidays. The weather is so cold. People is not, it's in the deepest of the winter. People is already, in a way irritated, and they just go from their car into their house.
Right.
Everybody's different, but in generally, we can do that and look into every season and say, am I going to be a little more lonely this time of the year?
Oh, okay.
What is important to know is because oxytocin is only produced when you're with people that you love.
Mm.
And when you're by yourself, you're just not producing that hormone. It all comes down to hormones and neurotransmitters. So what we do is that can we create a weekly event that you can meet with this, with the people that you love. And again, that brings novelty into your life, knowing that it's going to be during this time of the year.
Right.
So it becomes like this ritual. Oh yeah, during this time of the year, I tend to do this, but from a conscious manner, from knowing the benefits. And then when we look at neuroplasticity and novelty, what is interesting is that since the weather changes, we change our habits.
Mm-hmm.
So for me in the summertime, my novelty is perhaps baseball. Like I play baseball in the summer, but once fall arrives, baseball goes away.
Right.
Well, what can I do to bring novelty in my life? It's just this one hobby. So then, for example, again, I'm just very active. So basketball in the winter is one of them. And again, it's because I realized, wow, baseball has such a benefit from a competition standpoint, I have so many benefits from it that I miss.
Right.
I can bring that into the winter with basketball. And then for some people, it might be, I can learn a new language because it's winter, it's cold outside, I'm spending more time indoors, or I can play that instrument that I used to love.
Yeah.
I can quilt. I can get into this activity. So what we want to do is create the conditions for that activity to thrive. And one of those is obviously your indoor space being set off, just, hey, get all the supplies you need. And also just do it once a week. Like, can you put in your calendar? It might be Saturday, Sunday, it might be in the evening, so that you actually do it. If you're doing that, your brain is going to be going through neuroplasticity. It's going to be experiencing graceful aging is what I call.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's just from the novelty perspective. But the interesting thing is that all these behaviors are linked to each other. Just like your dog needs to go for a walk, we need it as much as your dog because we have to move. That creates, again, it's all a relationship between stress and rest. We kind of talked about melatonin before. It's like stress. We want to create stress in our bodies when we go and exercise. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because then we can recover better. So at the same time, we want to sleep better so that we can go through neuroplasticity and autophagy and all these reconstructive and restful phases we go through when we sleep. So that's why we look at sleep, exercise, nutrition, novelty, connection with the outdoors, connection with others, and they are all interconnected. Something that is interesting is that you mentioned the Harvard study. I believe that they're actually going into the next generation because they are trying to understand from a epigenetical perspective. So what I use is epigenetics and the understanding that it is important to know our genes, to know who we are. But again, the study shows that the environment and our habits are more important when it comes to living a long, happy life for a long time, right? To die in a graceful way, perhaps, to live longer. Not just to live longer, but to live healthier.
Right.
It's like when they did this study, they realized that. So now they're trying to follow that with the next generation because there is a linkage that happens. Is that there are genes that are activated because of the environment.
Right.
The environment is not just the weather. The environment is what I just mentioned: sleeping, exercising, social dynamics that change throughout the year. So what we have is an app that allows us to know who you are, and then it gives us a really good cycle of rest and stress,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can have a better cognitive function, so you can have a better physical function. So we essentially create the ideal day during this specific time of the year. And by our understanding that the seasons bring change,
Mm-hmm.
then we adjust that 4 times a year,
Mm-hmm.
so that you are at your best balance between rest and stress, which essentially what it means is being in the flow and going back to the yin yang, right? Like going back to being with nature. I mean, the flow is now being used a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but essentially it's being in sync with our environment, with nature, with others.
Sure.
That's how we can produce more. It's not for production's sake, but things come natural. We feel better, we age better, we live longer. That's how we're able to achieve that.
Yes, I think it's very interesting when I think about like your journey moving to the Midwest and having your environment change so dramatically. It's like you didn't have the background or the stories
Yeah.
that supported this kind of weather shift throughout the year. And I think when you see folklore, like when you see people moving to a different part of the world and bringing their folklore with them, but then it changes over time based on where they end up. Right. And sort of the environment around them. And I do like that you describe environment as all of those factors. It's your own personal environment, the people you talk to and the weather outside. And I think that it's really interesting because I used to have a co-host, Tanya, on the podcast, and she was Dutch, and she had come and she now lives in North Carolina. And so just her going through this like journey of connecting with the land spirits there, because she says it's not like this where I grew up. So she did a lot of work about understanding what it's like right where she is,
Yeah.
and sort of saying I need to understand what the land is speaking to me here. And that's how
Yeah.
she kind of went through that transition to be comfortable up in the mountains where she lives outside of Asheville. And it's just fascinating what she went through in order to connect so strongly there. And I think that, we could all do well to pay attention to not only
Mhm.
where we're from and the stories that we've carried, whether it's personal family stories or the folklore that comes from wherever we're from, but also dive into where you currently are, because that is the huge difference, right?
Absolutely. I say, no matter the advice is not for you if he doesn't know you, first of all. But in order to know somebody, it's a little extensive. And if he doesn't know where you are and what time of the year you are into,
Hmm. Hmm.
meaning who you are genetically, where you are, and the time of the year matters from an energetic perspective.
Right,
So understanding that allows you to, perhaps, again, doing meditation to relax yourself is great in the summertime.
right.
And then perhaps doing breathing meditation to increase your energy in the winter might be great. But again, it depends on who you are, where you are. So all that advice on YouTube is a little misleading, because you don't know in which for which season and for which location it's made to be. And yes, you're absolutely right. The reason that I'm talking about this is because I'm creating a movement for people like me 15 years ago
Hmm.
that moved to a new place and nobody told them, hey, this is what you can expect from living here.
Right,
This is how life moves around here. There are social rhythms, the temperature rhythms, the lighting.
right,
This is what you tend to feel like. I want to be a guide for those people,
right.
because there is nobody out there right now doing it, because I was seeking that. I was seeking that knowledge, that understanding. So a lot of what I do is to guide people on their own way. So I create a framework that they can plug into and see, okay, this is the lighting pattern that I experience during this time of the year,
Hmm. Hmm.
and become aware. And this is how we can create routines that sustain that.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I was so struck. I have a friend who's from South America, and was up here and it was winter and it was not a bad day. And I walked outside with him and I was like, oh, it's going to snow. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, how would you know that? And I said, well, you can smell it. Like, it smells like snow, right? And he was like, what
Uh-huh.
are you talking about? And I was like,
Uh-huh.
can't you, like, it's the smell in the air. And he just was like, nope, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it's funny because that just was so natural to me. Like I've always just you like right before it starts to snow, you can smell it.
So talking about you being a sensitive person,
Mm.
I think that within us, that intuition, that primal knowledge is there.
Mhm.
Now you can sense that, but most people can't. I have something similar that is that when we're going to a transition from the fall to the winter, is during that fall time when it's a storm, it's windy, it's like the first big storm kind of hitting us.
Right,
You know what storm I'm talking about. It was already getting mild and cold here and there, but the storm
right.
is coming. And what I realized over the years is that we have a stress response to that.
Mm.
We like to think that we are isolated in our house that has heating and this and that, but our brain is still thousands of years ago. And when it sees that, our brain sends a signal, which is stress,
Hmm.
which means be alert, things are changing. You better have your stuff figured out. You better have your supplies, your wood, your clothes, your shelter. You better be alert. And what used to happen back in the day when I was out of whack is that I would get confused, I would get anxiety, I would be stressed, I would be, it's that feeling, right? Like you're actually getting stressed and you don't know why.
Right.
It can mess you up. And I used to be there. And now what I do is that, okay, over time I became aware that's happening. And it makes sense, right? From a private perspective, that's how we're here today. We survive. And what I do is that I actually honor that.
Hmm.
Even though I have heating and air, I still have a fireplace.
Hmm.
So I have my little area in my house where I stock my wood. I go around my house, make sure I'm not going to be mowing anymore. So I kind of change from summer gear to snow gear.
Right.
I unplug the hoses. I just look around, oh, let me have the salt kind of in this area because I'm going to need it anyways. And I just kind of enter into that and honor it.
Right.
Then the stress goes away. How? By having a behavior. So being aware of that chemical reaction, being conscious about that, and then having a behavior
Hmm.
that manipulates that chemical reaction.
Hmm. Hmm.
You are easing that stress. You're looking around, you're making sure you're prepared, you're being conscious, and then you can, by the end of it, you can say, yeah, I'm ready for this transition. Let's step right into it. So that is something that I actually do every year.
Well, that's really interesting to me. I think that what that brings up for me is that's one of the reasons that there's so much weather folklore. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in morning, sailor's warning. And that has, scientific basis on the way that the, air pressure is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that it is stressful. It was really stressful before, we had all these modern conveniences because, you had to evaluate, do you have enough wood to last you through the winter? Because it's going to be really bad trying to get some if you don't. And it's all of those things that are important for us to stay alive. Like, and you'd have to put up provisions. You would be canning in the fall. However, you're going to stabilize your meat, if you're salting your meat or whatever, because you wanted to make sure you had more than enough. And that's why we want to know, like, that's why we have Groundhog Day. Like, how much longer is it going to be before things start growing again and before we start to then move into that phase of abundance? We have to make it that far, right? It doesn't, it's no good if you make it 6 weeks
Yeah.
short, right? Because you're going to starve.
Yeah. I study seasonal affective disorder because it's the segment of the population that truly gets that the environment truly affects them at a high degree. and they suffer from it, so they're aware of that. So I have different groups that I'm part of to see people's reactions. And what you just mentioned is what I have noticed, and is that it gets worse for the people during February and March. And this year was a little early, so March was kind of good, but especially February has. I always travel in February. There is different reasons why, from an actual scientific standpoint. There's science behind the. It's all about hormones and what we're experiencing internally. But then there is also this one theory that I have, what you just mentioned, which is that we're most sensitive during this time because look back to epigenetics and knowing that our ancestry
Hmm.
passes down genes. I mean, there have been experiments of the Dutch, hunger famine that happens after the World War, the Second World War, that a lot of people was just hungry for a long time, and that changed their genetical expression, and that even changed their offspring, like their next generations down the line. There's experiments that happen and show this, and what I want us to think about is that that has been proof. Like there is science, there's research about that. So now looking back at February, sure, you probably had some supplies, but if you didn't have enough, when was the
Hmm.
most stressful time of the winter? Was towards the end.
Right.
Even once the winter ends too, because you gotta wait for everything to pop, right? Like like it doesn't happen. Some of them are already out there. You need to know what you're doing, but the toughest part is towards the end of the winter. Essentially, that's when people will run out of supplies. That's when people will hibernate the most, because if you don't have supplies, you have to stay indoor and trying to save energy, which is one of the more primal instincts that we have, is to save
Hmm.
energy, prevent risk, and procreate. And all the three
Yeah.
of them happen indoors, especially in the wintertime. So, what you just mentioned about you're running out of supplies, people feel that anxiety. They just don't know what to do with it. And it's not necessarily something that they have done, is the environment changing and their primal genes activating, is the expression, is the non-conscious behaviors and thought processes that we have had since millennials. That's why we're here. We're surviving. So what I'm saying with this is I completely agree. I have looked into it. Most of the spikes in depression and anxiety happen at the end of the winter. And I believe that a lot of that has to do with our survival instincts.
Interesting. So that's why you were talking about sort of bringing the energy down, like, in the starting in the spring, because you did have that anxiety that is, generational kind of trauma anxiety.
Yeah, I implement, since we're talking about the subject, I have a retreat that I do in February. And again, there is scientific evidence that we tend to accumulate. It's called. I always have a hard time saying it. It's adenosine. Is a neurochemical that is received by our receptors, and adenosine it basically is like accumulation of tiredness, and that happens throughout the winter. Like we get to clear that out throughout the day and when we sleep, but it gets out of whack because again it gets darker, and even though it might be daytime, we get a lot of 2 week cloudy days.
Right.
Like like we get some cloudy patches throughout. So when we start leading into February, there is an actual accumulation of hormones that make us feel tired. I mean, it truly happens. So I implement a retreat in February to
Mhm.
go to the Caribbean for 5 days.
Oh, wow.
And what we do in our retreat is that we actually clear that accumulation of, perhaps it's melatonin, is what we want to call it. But we go to a natural place that there's not that much electromagnetic frequency. There's internet, and we're connected, but it is a Zen like environment. It's in the Caribbean. You get a lot of sunshine to kind of flush yourself out. You just kind of get a little break, and you get a little buzz out of it. Then you come back home, and it's kind of like it gives you something to look for before. When you are into it, you truly enjoy, this is paradise. And then when you come back, you kind of gain some energy, perhaps. So when we're looking at the seasons and when to travel, we kind of want to do that. We want to consider that because a lot of people travel in the summer when it's the busiest, when it's the most expensive, when their lives are actually very busy and chaotic. So we kind of want to bring it in when you have a little more time, perhaps when you need it the most.
Right.
And again, it's just looking at the seasons and implementing behaviors and habits that will create that flow throughout the year.
Sure. I think that's interesting what you said about the sunshine because, being from the Midwest, it's, you get less sun in the winter because you don't go outside as much. And they talk about vitamin D. That's you get your vitamin D from the sun. Vitamin D is actually a hormone,
Yeah.
right? And so, like going and getting a big shot of sun, because you're also missing out on that
Yeah.
hormone. So it's not only getting rid of the hormones that are, bringing you down, but it's reintroducing the hormone that is going to give you that energy and the boost in your mood.
Yeah. From a circadian rhythm perspective, we're supposed to go outside, get the sunlight in the morning, first thing in the morning. That kind of activates our wake up cycle and is great. The same that throughout the day we go outside and walk. The reality is that a lot of times we wake up and it's just cloudy.
Right.
In the Midwest, and sure there is light that goes through, and you should still benefit from going outside. If you just look throughout the window, 50% of the like the actual good chemicals that you're gonna get are not there. You have to get outside and do that. But again, it gets cold. Even if you get outside, you are covered with sweaters. I mean, all that is exposed is sometimes is just this part of your face. And I have hair, so not even my shin gets much of it. So my point is that there are recommendations that are just simply hard to follow because they are not adapted to the environment and the time of the year we're living into. So it's just acknowledging that and trying to do our part, like you said, like the lighting.
Right.
I have it in my office. I recommend it to everybody. Have it in front of your computer so you can just turn it on while you're working. Usually use it in the morning, and then the same with a grounding mat. So that's kind of like my winter kit, and I have like a little winter supply of vitamins and supplements, which is like the last thing that we look into. If you are taking care of your sleep, if you're taking care of your exercise, if you're taking care of your nutrition and social dynamics and connection with nature and novelty, you already got 90% done. The rest is that little 10% you can get from it. I just say this so make a point that there's a big focus nowadays with hacking the environment. It's like, getting cold plunges, get into, the happy light. It will help, but if you are off on everything else, it's not going to make a big difference. So having that light, again, is a way to introduce lighting. Having the ground mat just to ground because we're not going outside, just to get our frequency to the frequency of the earth. That's another good hack that I like to implement in the fall and the winter when it's cold. Again, to kind of mimic what we get in the summer that make us thrive, but not to expect that we're going to be living a productive summer like during the winter time. It's just to balance ourselves.
Right. So, if people want to dive more into this and start living seasonally in the place where they're at on planet Earth right now, how do they find you?
I recommend going to my school community where basically we're walking together all year round. So we can provide the link in the description below. And we also
Right.
have a free community on Facebook as well, where again, we provide some guidance. Because what I want you to understand is
Mhm.
that I'm perhaps a guide. Like that's my mission here is to let you know this is what's happening in the environment right now. Things are shifting.
Mhm.
This is how the lighting is going to affect you. Start paying attention to this. Let's do it the right way. So basically, I rally the troops
Mhm.
and we transition with the seasons. But what we also have is an app, an epigenetics app
Oh,
that will guide you into understanding who you are, that also understand where you are at. So the idea is to create this balance between rest and stress so that you are in the flow, meaning not too much rest, not too much stress, just promote what you want to achieve and being understanding that as the seasons shift, we want to adjust to it. So we do all that in our school community. You get access to the app and you get guidance. We meet weekly and you have some one-on-one coaching calls as well. So I can guide you through this. And what
mhm.
I realize is that if you do this for 3 months, you get a pretty good idea what it's like. And if you do it
Mhm.
for the actual year, what you're doing is that you are creating a blueprint that you're going to be able to follow all your life.
Right.
Essentially, instead of saying this is my routine all year round, it's like, no, this is my routine this time of the year that works well. And you were able to find it by first creating a hypothesis
Mm-hmm.
and then seeing how you react with support with others. You do this together and then you keep transitioning. Once you're done through that cycle, everything repeats itself. Next year is going to be very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So our process is about documenting and leaving clues behind so that next year you just start where you left season after season and you are in the flow all year round.
So if they're looking for the app or the Facebook page, they look specifically for the seasonal movement?
Correct. The seasonal movement in the school community and the seasonal movement on Facebook. On Facebook, you're going to find me as the seasonal movement Ruben Gomez.
Okay.
And then we have an actual group as well. But you can message me. I'm active on Facebook, on Instagram. And yeah, we're going to provide the links
Yeah.
so that you can just click on and go directly there. I'm here to serve and to guide you through your seasonal journey.
Great. Any final thoughts for listeners before we go?
Well, since we're talking about folklore, I want to say that it is a man. There is reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because it's fun, even though it is. It absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
It was created because that was our livelihood to survive and to thrive,
Right,
to
right.
live well, and understanding that we live in a different environment, but at the same time honoring both of them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or folklore and or new environment and technology is what creates the harmony that is available to us today.
Right,
So my invitation is to embrace and to learn, to
right.
become aware, and not to ignore this side of things, because there is a lot of wisdom and we could be doing a lot better if we would have hold on it a lot stronger.
Right, right. Yeah, maybe we need some new folklore around how to live in our personal environments. Now, on the upside, I will say that it occurred to me during this conversation, any of you that did not stick to your New Year's resolutions, if you made anything about exercising, you're in luck because you should have been resting then. So now is the time to get back into that exercise program.
I know we would start saying goodbye, but I gotta say this, and is that the reason that we fail when we create these goals is because we miss to understand that every season, when the environment changes, it changes our day. Meaning, perhaps your goal was to go to work out at, I don't know, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and you start missing that in the winter because it's dark and you're tired.
Right,
Well, in the summer, it actually kind of works really good, perhaps like working out in the afternoon because it's so much brighter.
right.
What I want you to understand is when it comes down to goals, that's what we do. We create goals for specific seasons, knowing that the environment we make it very convenient for you to achieve your goals.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's not just throwing a bunch of random goals to the wall and seeing if they stick. It's more like this is what is the most convenient to do this time of the year.
Right.
Let's commit to that for 3 months, and then let's transition and realize when we're transitioning what is going to be the most convenient and the things that where I want to go, but what is the smartest way to get there
Mm-hmm.
by understanding the environment, how I'm going to react to it. So I create those goals. So I advise just to start looking at goals in a 3 month cycle into a seasonal cycle.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about the seasonal movement.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. It was amazing, and I have a lot of fun. I hope your audience had a lot of fun as well, and I'm here to serve. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As always, thanks for listening to Folkloring. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent, or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.